I haven't slept in days. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. The moment it all started. The things I ignored. The choices I made. It's unraveling now, and I can't stop it. I don't even know if I want to. If you're listening to this, maybe you'll understand. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll judge me. Maybe you'll hate me. But the truth has to come out. I have to say it before it eats me alive. But before I begin, consider this your warning. This story is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's about family, loneliness, and mistakes that can never be undone. If you're not ready for that, stop listening now. I grew up in a quiet house. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind. The kind where silence isn't comforting, it's suffocating. My dad, Jameson, was around, but only in the most basic sense. He existed in the same space as us, but it was like he was living a different life. Always working late, always staring at his phone, always finding a reason to be anywhere but home. My mom, Gia, was different. She felt things. Deeply. She was the kind of person who smiled at strangers, who teared up at commercials, who laughed at jokes that weren't funny just to make someone feel good. But there was something else, too. Something behind her eyes. A sadness she never spoke about. A loneliness that filled the spaces my dad left empty. I didn't think about it much when I was younger. I just accepted it. The way she sat alone at the kitchen table long after dinner was over. The way she stared out the window like she was waiting for something that was never going to come. But looking back, I see it now. She had been alone for a long time. It's funny how easy it is to ignore things when you're not looking for them. How you can miss something obvious just because it never crossed your mind that it could mean something. There were moments, small, quiet things that should have made me pause. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The way her voice softened when she said my name. The way she lingered in conversations like she didn't want them to end. I remember walking into the kitchen late one night, just grabbing a drink from the fridge. She was sitting there, alone, a half-full glass of wine in front of her. There was this look on her face. Something tired. Something sad. She said something to me that night. Something I didn't think much of at the time. But now, it plays in my head like a warning I should have heard. It was all leading somewhere. I just didn't see it yet. It was just a normal day. Or at least, that's what I thought. I had gone for a run. Nothing special. Just another part of my routine. When I got back, I headed straight for the shower. I left the door open, just like I always did. It wasn't a big deal. It had never been a big deal. But that day, something felt different. There was a moment. A feeling. Like I wasn't alone, even though I should have been. I turned my head slightly. And there she was. Standing there. Just, looking. There was nothing in her expression that I could understand. It wasn't shock. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't anger. It was something else. Something unreadable. I should have said something. I should have done something. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I wasn't sure if I had misunderstood, or if something was really changing between us. And then, she said something. Something simple. Something quiet. And after that, nothing was ever the same again. Some moments seem small when they happen. Just a blink in time, something your brain barely registers. But later, when you look back, you realize that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment the ground shifted beneath you. I didn't see it right away. I don't think I wanted to. It was just another day. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I had gone for a run like I always did. The sun was beating down, sweat soaking into my shirt, my legs burning by the time I made it back home. I was exhausted. I just wanted a shower. So I walked inside, kicked off my shoes, peeled off my shirt, and headed straight to the bathroom. I left the door open without thinking. I always did. But as I reached for the water, I felt something. That strange, prickling sensation that you're not alone. Like someone's watching you. And when I turned my head just slightly, I saw her. She was standing in the hallway. Not moving. Not saying anything. Just looking. At first, I thought maybe I had startled her. Maybe she hadn't meant to stop, maybe she was just passing by. But she didn't move. She didn't turn away. I should have said something. A quick hey, a casual what's up, anything to break whatever this was. But I didn't. I just stood there, waiting, heart hammering a little harder than it should have been. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. She didn't say a word. Didn't explain. Just walked away. But something had shifted. I could feel it. The moment sat heavy in the air, lingering long after she had disappeared down the hall. I tried to shake it off. I stepped into the shower, let the hot water rush over me, forced my thoughts to move on. But that feeling didn't leave me. It settled somewhere deep inside, twisting itself into something I didn't have a name for yet. After that day, I started noticing things. Or maybe they had always been there, and I was just now paying attention. Her eyes stayed on me a little longer. Not in an obvious way. Just long enough for me to catch it. Long enough for me to wonder if I was imagining it. Her touch lingered, too. A hand on my shoulder that didn't move away as quickly as it should have. A brush of fingers against mine when she handed me something. Little things. Things I could explain away if I wanted to. But I didn't want to. Because something in me was changing, too. I caught myself waiting for those moments. Watching for them. And once I realized that, I knew I was in trouble. It wasn't just me. She had changed in other ways, too. She barely spoke to my dad anymore. Not that they had ever been overly affectionate, but there was a time when they at least tried. A time when they exchanged small touches, shared inside jokes, had real conversations. That time was gone. Now, she barely looked at him. When she did, it was with something unreadable in her expression. And he barely noticed. Or if he did, he didn't care. Their marriage had been falling apart for years, but now, it felt like it had already crumbled. They were just living in the wreckage, pretending it still looked like a home. I saw it in the way she carried herself. Like she was waiting for something to happen. Like she was waiting for him to fight for her. But he never did. And I think that broke her more than the cheating ever could. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind looping back to that moment in the hallway over and over again. Then I heard my dad's voice. Low. Sharp. The kind of voice that meant a fight was coming. I didn't move at first. I didn't want to be involved. But then I heard my mom's voice. And something in it made me sit up. There was anger, but not the kind that came with yelling. This was quieter. More dangerous. So I got up. Slowly. Stepped into the hallway, just close enough to hear. And what I heard changed everything. She knew. She knew about the other woman. And he didn't even deny it. He just sighed, like he was exhausted by the whole thing. Like it wasn't worth his time to lie anymore. She asked him if he had ever loved her. Really loved her. And his answer? Silence. Not even a single word. I don't think she expected an apology. Not really. But I think she expected something. And he didn't give her anything. That was the moment she broke. Not when she found out about the affair. Not when he admitted it without hesitation. It was when he looked at her and didn't see anything worth fighting for. That was the moment she was done with him. That was the moment everything else started. After that night, nothing felt the same. I saw her differently. Or maybe I was finally seeing her for who she had been all along. She wasn't just my mother. She was a woman. A woman who had been ignored. A woman who had spent years waiting for someone to see her. And for the first time I realized I had been waiting, too. She started talking to me more. Not just in passing. Not just about small things. Real conversations. Honest ones. The kind I had never had with her before. At first, it was little things. A comment here, a glance there. But then, it started going deeper. She told me about my father. About how things used to be. How they had been in love once, so in love that nothing else had mattered. She told me about the late nights waiting up for him, the moments she pretended not to notice his distance, the way he had slowly become a stranger to her. She told me how lonely she had been. How empty the house felt when I wasn't around. How, sometimes, she wished she could just disappear. And I listened. Because no one else did. I let her words sink into me, wrapping around my ribs like something warm and dangerous. I told myself I was just being supportive. That I was just being a good son. But there were moments, quiet, lingering moments, where I knew it was more than that. And I think she knew it, too. It was late when the storm rolled in. I had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle against the windows. The rain hit hard, relentless, the kind that soaks into everything and makes the air feel heavy. Then the power went out. The house fell into silence. Thick, suffocating silence. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, hesitant. I didn't move at first. Then my door creaked open. And she was standing there. She told me she couldn't sleep. Said the storm was too loud, that she didn't want to be alone. And I told her she didn't have to be. She sat beside me on the bed, closer than she should have. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain. The distant roll of thunder. The storm outside matching the one inside of me. Then she exhaled. Slow. Shaky. And I felt it, the warmth of her hand on my arm. Not just a touch. Not just a moment of comfort. Something else. Something I couldn't explain. She didn't move away. And I didn't either. The air between us changed, thickened, filled with something unspoken. Then she leaned in. Just slightly. Just enough. And for the first time I realized there was no turning back. I woke up to sunlight filtering through the blinds. The storm was gone. The house was quiet again. And she was gone, too. But the space beside me still held her warmth. I sat up slowly, my chest tight, my head spinning. It wasn't just a dream. It had happened. And now, there was no pretending otherwise. I tried to act normal. Tried to tell myself that it didn't mean anything. But everything felt different. The way she looked at me over breakfast. The way she brushed past me in the hallway. The way I caught myself watching her, waiting for the next moment, the next touch, the next time the silence between us would feel too heavy to bear. I knew then, this wasn't something that would go away. It was only the beginning. And I didn't know if I wanted it to stop. I thought I could pretend. I thought we both could. We didn't talk about that night. Not once. Not in words. But we didn't have to. Because the silence between us said everything. The morning after, we acted like nothing had changed. I went downstairs. She was already there, standing at the stove, making coffee like it was just another morning. I told myself it didn't mean anything. That if we ignored it long enough, it would disappear. But it didn't. The way she looked at me wasn't the same. And I knew the way I looked at her had changed, too. Little things started to shift. Things no one else would notice. The way her hand would brush against mine when she passed me something. The way her eyes lingered on me a second too long. The way I caught myself waiting for those moments. waiting for her to be near me. Waiting for something to happen again. And I hated that I wanted it to. I don't know when my dad started noticing. Maybe it was a glance that lasted too long. Maybe it was the way I tensed when she walked into the room. Maybe it was something even smaller, something I didn't even realize I was doing. But he saw it. He didn't say anything at first. But I felt it. The way his eyes followed us when we moved around the house. The way his expression shifted when she laughed at something I said. The way he stood in the doorway, just watching, when we were in the same room. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. That I was being paranoid. But then I realized, he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. It wasn't just him. Jada noticed, too. She had been my best friend since we were kids. She knew me better than anyone. And she could tell something was off. At first, it was small things. Little comments. Casual questions. You've been weird lately. You seem different. What's going on with you? I brushed it off. Told her she was imagining things. But she wasn't. And she didn't stop pushing. One afternoon, we were sitting in my car, parked outside her house. She was scrolling through her phone, not really paying attention to me. And then, out of nowhere, "It's about your mom, isn't it?" The air inside the car changed. She wasn't joking. She wasn't fishing. She already knew. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she just had a feeling. But the way I froze, the way my breath caught just slightly, that was all she needed. She turned to me then. Looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Tatum. What did you do?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because the look on my face had already told her everything. I thought I could keep it together. Thought I could keep pretending. But secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks. And ours was about to explode. It happened at dinner. My dad had been quiet all evening, barely touching his food, barely speaking. My mom was the same. And me? I could feel it building. The pressure. The weight. The unspoken truth sitting in the middle of the table like a loaded gun. And then, he put his fork down. Slowly. Carefully. And looked straight at me. "You think I don't see it?" Silence. I couldn't move. "You think I don't know?" My mom's breath hitched. He turned to her then. His voice was low. "Dangerous." "How long?" She didn't answer. And that was the answer. Everything erupted at once. Accusations. Shouting. My dad's chair scraping against the floor as he stood up so fast it nearly fell over. My mom, tears in her eyes, shaking her head, trying to say something, anything. Me, frozen. Unable to speak. Unable to move. Because there was no escaping it now. The truth was out. And there was no taking it back. It's over now. I lost everything. My home. My family. Myself. One moment. One choice. That's all it took to destroy it all. If I had walked away that night. If I had ignored the signs. Would things be different? Or was this always going to happen? I don't know anymore. After that night, I didn't get to say much. Didn't get to explain. Didn't get to fight back. Because my dad wasn't looking for an explanation. He was looking for a way to erase me. He told me to leave. Not for a night. Not for a week. For good. "You're not my son anymore." Those were the last words he said to me. I don't know if I'll ever hear his voice again. Maybe that's for the best. Because I don't know how I could ever look him in the eye. And my mom? I don't know what happened to her after I left. I heard things. Little pieces of information passed around by people who still talked to me. She stopped going out. Stopped answering calls. She barely leaves the house. I wonder if she thinks about me. I wonder if she regrets it. Or if she's just trying to forget. But here's the part one can't stop thinking about. Was this ever really about me? Or was I just caught in the middle of something that had nothing to do with me at all? Maybe this was her way of getting back at him. Maybe I was just a weapon she used in a war she had already lost. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe she really did see me. Not as a son. Not as a child. But as someone who made her feel alive again. And that's the part one don't want to think about. Because if that's true, then maybe I wanted to feel alive, too. Infidelity destroys people. It tears families apart. But does it always happen for the same reason? Is it always about betrayal? About selfishness? Or is it about something deeper? Loneliness. Desperation. The need to feel wanted. I made a mistake. A mistake that I can never take back. But if you were in my shoes, if you were drowning in loneliness, if someone looked at you like you were the only person in the world, would you have done anything different? Would you have walked away? Or would you have made the same mistake? Think about it. And before you judge me, ask yourself, are you sure you wouldn't have done the same?